In preparation for its sequel, I recently played through Psychonauts for the very first time. Psychonauts is a 3D platformer from the studio Double Fine, helmed by Tim Shafer, who is widely known for games like Brutal Legend, Broken Age, and Grim Fandango.
Intimidating? Me? But I'm your friend. My name's Manny Calavera. I'm your new travel agent.
Double Fine is the perfect example of a studio that makes really clever and stylish games with a lot of artistry, and they've always struggled to make money because of it. Psychonauts was the first game that came from Double Fine. The studio was started by Shafer along with some of his colleagues from his time at LucasArts, and it had a heavily troubled development but managed to release in 2005. Psychonauts did not take the world by storm at all, but it has managed to be a cult classic 3D platforming collectathon. So in this video, I am going to discuss my experience in playing Psychonauts 1 for the first time in 2021, and I'll end it by talking about some of my hopes and takes I have relating to the upcoming sequel, Psychonauts 2.
Okay, quick eye exam before we start.
Before beginning, I should give you the environment in which I was playing this game. As a quick prologue, it's worth pointing out that I played this game on my Xbox Series X via backwards compatibility with the OG Xbox. My estimated final playtime was about 9 hours, and the circumstances of my playing are notable. I played it as part of a game club for my podcast, and while I naturally play games somewhat quickly, this added pressure of trying to finish something in time for a discussion definitely made me more focused on completing it, opposed to being as thorough as I possibly could be. The premise. In Psychonauts, you play as Rasputin, or Raz for short. He has snuck into a summer camp after running away from his home in the circus. Raz is a psychic and has a dream of being a psychonaut. The Psychonauts are a group akin to something out of an 80s spy film. They use their psychic powers and they can enter people's minds. The story sees Raz expanding his psychic powers in order to become a psychonaut, and he's thrust into being the hero of the story when all of his teachers and peers are kidnapped by Coach Oleander and Dr. Lobato.
Little boy, I am sorry to say that you have a very serious mental problem. The trouble originates in this area, here. The area that we in the medical profession like to refer to as the brain. You see, son, it's just no good. I hate to be so blunt, but you have the insanity of a manatee.
I know. People are always saying that.
On the surface, Psychonauts is a game that is trying to win you over with style and charm. Its art style is kinda gross, but not in a demeaning way. It's gross in the same way that kids' shows were in the 2000s. It's a style that tells the player that this game isn't too serious. You're gonna have fun and laugh at the content of this game, opposed to being introduced to anything terribly profound.
Sir, I am here to learn, sir.
You're here to train hard?
Yes, sir.
Develop a skill?
Yes, sir.
To become part of a noble team?
Yes.
Yes, to become
Yes.
a janitor.
And the style is one of the best parts of the game overall. It does deliver on its humor and lightheartedness, so much so that it leaves you open to being affected by some of the more serious illusions that come within the game. But first things first, Psychonauts is a video game, so we need to talk about how this game plays. Creaky mechanics. Coach Oleander's mind is the first world, and it acts as a tutorial for the mechanics and the collectibles in the world. The boot camp style world shows you figments of imagination that level up Raz, emotional baggage, memory vaults, cards, and cobwebs. The only other collectible that exists outside of mines are the arrowheads, which act as a currency. Psychonauts is part of the late 90s, early 2000s class of collectathon 3D platformers. And from a collectathon standpoint, I think it's really only alright. I like a lot of the collectibles conceptually, specifically the figments of imagination and the emotional baggage being literal bags, because I find these ideas really clever. I like them. But the figments litter the entire level, and I thought they distracted from the design of the levels. And there's no real reward for collecting baggage besides concept art. So after a while, I just stopped collecting them because I didn't need them. The only collectible I found essential is the memory vaults, which provide a further look into the backstory of the character whom you're exploring the mind of. They provide simply a slideshow of pencil drawings that are astoundingly effective in their storytelling, but I'll touch more on that later. From a gameplay perspective, the best platformers to me are defined by options. You see the sick shit players can pull off in Mario 64 or Super Mario Odyssey, and you immediately understand that the mechanics alone make these games special. Psychonauts starts off feeling as stiff as can be. Raz is slow and seemingly only has a double jump. For about the first 2 hours of this game, I was worried that these were the mechanics I was going to have to deal with. Luckily, this is remedied once you get to the level Mila's Dance Party, which is a colorful and energetic mind of one of the main Psychonauts, Mila. In this level, you're taught the levitation ability, which shows Raz form a ball of psychic energy that he can run around on like he's Aang from The Last Airbender. The enhanced speed and jumping ability that comes with levitation changes the game up enough to make it a passable platformer, whose flaws are really only exposed in some of the sweatier moments of the game. Some people may disagree and think that levitation allows you to cheese the platforming a bit, but I saw it more as another option. If you can pull it off, it's a valid method, and that's how I like my platformers to be. From a combat perspective, I'm not your guy for this. I don't like when a platformer leans on combat, so the moments in which Psychonauts did, I thought were clunky and forgettable. It was always much more difficult than you wanted it to be to aim at enemies, so I typically opted for melee. Luckily, combat isn't a huge part of the game, but this is definitely an area where it played like it was an original Xbox PS2 era game. One side effect of the age of the gameplay is that it made the game feel longer. I mentioned that my playthrough was only about 9 hours long, but this was a long 9 hours. The worlds were typically 45 minutes to an hour long, and the gameplay just made them feel much longer than that. I'll be getting more into my appreciation for the design and the charm of this game, but that can only carry an interactive experience so much. At certain points, you need to enjoy the interaction that you're doing. This is not to say that all times where I was physically playing the game, I was having a bad time. It's more that a level typically had about 30 minutes of fun for me, and then it went on an extra 15 to 30 minutes. I think that this only could have been remedied by a game that felt better to play, or maybe if I found the collectibles a little more interesting to go after. I can't say I'm crazy about the gameplay of Psychonauts at all, because it felt very old. Not in an unplayable sense, but in a way that definitely affected my enjoyment. But this is overall the most negative I'm going to be on this review of the game. The rest that I have to talk about, I'm very positive on. Nostalgic style. The game hardly ages from a visual perspective because it's stylized. Yeah, you can obviously tell it's older, and I mean, I played the original Xbox version with the Zack Snyder 4x3 crop, but I have no complaints. The age of the art style actually enhanced it for me. I've heard the art style described as Tim Burton-like, which I absolutely see, but I thought of it the entire time as a playable Cartoon Network show, the type of Cartoon Network shows that I grew up with. And so much of this game in style and humor just screamed Cartoon Network to me. It's a little gross and rough around the edges on purpose because it goes in line with some of the absurdity that's present in the game. The personality that is present in the artwork is also on display in the levels that serve as depictions of consciousness. Step aside Persona 5, Psychonauts did it first, showcasing a paranoid mind like Boyd's as twisted in nature, with surveillance over every inch.
At least that's what the media would have you believe.
Or the mind of Agent 9, an enlightened stoic, as that of a cube that seems to just have abstract art on it. And these stylistic choices are enhanced by clever and funny ideas like the fact that one of Agent 9's biggest problems is the tacky design of lamps. Sharp wit. Hand in hand with its artistic style comes Shafer's sharp writing. I vibe with Tim Shafer's humor quite a bit. For one, he really effectively fits his more acute observations into dialogue in a way that doesn't seem forced at all. He's not afraid to contrast that with absurdity either, which absurdity may be when the game is at its best, specifically within the Milkman Conspiracy, a level that pretty easily takes the cake for best in the game. Following the character Boyd, who is the guard of the asylum, or so you think, you see him outside the gates rambling about the dairy industry. And when you enter his mind, you see him in front of a wall like the Charlie Day meme, putting together the pieces of his conspiracy about the milkman. You enter his world to find that he's paranoid about everything. Eyes and cameras at every turn. And one of the best additions is the enemy type in his mind. These guards in his mind act as a different profession, and it's on you to find the item that will allow you to blend in with them. Their characters have hilariously blunt dialogue, and I just couldn't get enough of them.
I see that you are grieving. I will give you your space.
And the gameplay of finding these items that allow you to blend in with them reminded me a lot of the roots of Double Fine, coming from the point-and-click adventure type games. While the game doesn't turn point-and-click, the way in which you solve these puzzles is just very reminiscent of that style to me, because it kind of lacks any sort of logic. It just simply works in this context. The Milkman Conspiracy is simply just the best example of the humor and the style being married within this game to create something truly special.
That book you found was dynamite. Blows the whole thing wide open.
And one thing I appreciate about this game is that the writing is both sensitive and unapologetic at the same time. This is not an example of entertainment that could not be done today. Shafer doesn't go super controversial or edgy at all, but the sensitive nature comes with the fact that Raz is exploring the psyches of mentally ill individuals. This is something that by today's standards may be deemed as simplistic or offensive, but it comes off much more as a game that is processing these subjects with humor. It's far from ignorance as well, because the vault collectibles I mentioned previously paint the more tragic story behind these characters. The vaults are the backstory, and the world is the reaction, and the way that tragedy is processed. The vaults are exactly what I'm talking about, of how the game uses its humor to open you up, and then when it wants to slip in something serious, it's very effective because your guard is kind of down, and you're not expecting to receive a story like the ones that come from the vaults. Processing with humor is not something that I think is for everyone, but it is something that I certainly identify with, and I appreciate that the game did it really effectively. There are more levels and moments worthy of highlighting, like the uniqueness of the board game with Napoleon, or the colors and overall concept of the bowl within Black Velvetopia. These are levels with really interesting designs and decisions, and I feel they should be appreciated, but I can't say I have as much to say on them as I do about, say, a level like the Milkman Conspiracy. Overall, the level design and writing within each level is definitely the highlight of Psychonauts. These are the parts that made me fall in love with the game, and while I would not say that every level is perfect, every level does have something interesting to say. As long as you're the type that likes using humor to process things that could be traumatic, I would say this game is definitely for you. And I also really appreciate that it has been revealed in Psychonauts 2 previews, they intro the game with a trigger warning about the nature of the game and the fact that it will handle these subjects with humor. I like that they are both being sensitive to a crowd that may desire the sensitivity, while also saying, this is our vision. And this is how we want to handle the discussion of these subjects, and I really respect that. So now it's time to transition into hype for Psychonauts 2. In 2015, 10 years after the initial game's release, plans of Psychonauts 2 were announced, along with a crowdfunding campaign through Fig. Within 38 days, they raised approximately $3.8 million, which was estimated to be about 1/3 of the total cost of the game, but was more than their desired $3.3 million they hoped to receive from the campaign. There is even more to their funding journey, as it seems that just about any game made by Double Fine has to fight tooth and nail for the right to exist. But in 2018, Double Fine was bought by Xbox Game Studios. and the process has seemingly been more straightforward. The support and money of Microsoft has given this game the opportunity to be the best it can possibly be. And now, about a month out from the sequel, previews and in-depth looks have come out for the game fans have waited 16 years for. Some of the things I've seen about the game have got me quite excited, because it seems to have all of the best characteristics of the original game while being fully modernized. The game is much prettier, and while we can't say for sure until we all get our hands on it, previews indicate that the gameplay feels good, and I'm just hoping that that really translates to the combat in the game. Despite not being in love with the first game, mainly based on the age of some of the mechanics, this sequel could really iron out most, if not all, of my critiques of the original, such as more interesting use of their collectibles and a modernized, smoother feel to its gameplay. Lastly, if I have a concern, it would be the idea that this game is bigger. Longer worlds and having more of them is not necessarily a good thing, but if the gameplay issues are ironed out and Mr. Shafer still has his fastball, the sequel has potential to be special. Psychonauts is far from a perfect game by today's standards, but it's a game whose style really clicked with me, to the extent that I can easily forgive its shortcomings. I don't expect Psychonauts 2 to take the world by storm, but I know I have bought in, and I'll be there day one. But please, God, let Dogen be in the game.
I had the strangest machine-induced dream about you.
TV,
Well, first of all, Sasha 9 invited me down to his secret lab, and
TV.